Today's top picks from Reuters Breaking Views. Forget Facebook. Diversified Chinese dotcoms may be worth a look. And elections unlikely to end investor worries about Egypt. With me now to discuss these stories is Reuters Breaking Views' Peter Larsen. Peter, the big challenge for dotcoms everywhere now, it's in news of course after Facebook, is avoiding the pitfalls of relying too heavily on advertising. Some companies in China have come up with the answer.
Yeah, it seems slightly odd to say that you should be, taking you can take a less risky bet than Facebook by diversifying into the Chinese equivalent. But actually, there's some interesting differences between the way some of these Chinese dotcoms work versus the way Facebook works. Facebook's totally dependent at the moment, anyway, on advertising, and there are some big questions over that model. We saw GM pull out because it found that the adverts it had been placing on Facebook weren't getting sufficient clicks, and so this is one of the things that's contributed to the fall as a result of the IPO. These Chinese businesses, Renren actually is also quite advertising dependent, has seen the shares fall quite heavily recently, but some of the others have more dependence on online gaming, which is actually a sort of a more stable form of revenue. So people are actually and brings people to their sites and keeps them there longer. Brings in some revenue, which is actually still growing quite quickly, and also crucially transfers much better to mobile devices. So whereas people are even less likely to click through on an ad on a mobile, they're still likely to play games.
That's all very well for a certain age bracket. I mean, I can't imagine too many people in their 50s and 60s will be sitting in for hours on end playing these games.
I think that's probably right. Yeah, but I think that the argument apparently in China in favor of online gaming is that it's cheaper than a night out, and so therefore you kind of you rather than go out, you stay in and play games online. It seems slightly tragic, but it's obviously works quite well for these Chinese online companies.
It's the way the youth of today is going, Peter, I think. Let's move on to Egypt now. The elections, of course, are almost upon us. But what power will the new president have, and how worried should investors be about that perhaps lack of authority? Well,
investors have been quite worried for quite some time. I mean, the economy has been really taking a real hammering since the Arab Spring, and we've had the devaluation of the Egyptian pound. We've had IMF help, and so one potential sort of beacon of light in all of this has been the presidential election. Say, well, once you get a president installed, then maybe things will stabilize a bit. But actually, we don't think it's going to be quite that straightforward, because actually, first to begin with, none of the candidates who are actually standing or allowed to stand in the election have really talked much about the economy. They've made some noise about growth and about sort of free markets and so forth, but not really much detail. And also there's the other question about really how much power they will have once they get elected. So this is really about trying to establish a civilian presidency.
Is that because the army is looking?
Exactly. You've got the military on one side, sort of potentially keeping an eye on things, and you never know if they might step in if things kind of get a bit too free for them. And so there's got to write a constitution, all these kind of things. So actually, the economy is not even probably not even the top priority, and there is scope to do things, but we think it will take some time for things to settle down economically in Egypt, even after the election. So
given all that, given those enormous challenges, why would you, as an investor, put your money in Egypt?
Well, I think that's the question a lot of investors are asking themselves and have been asking themselves for the past 12 months or so. I mean, I think long term you can make an argument that says, Egypt will open up. That you will have democracy, you will have more access to Western markets. That in the long term that will be beneficial, but there's still quite a lot of hurdles to clear before they get there, and so it's going to be quite a volatile ride.
It certainly seems that way. Peter, thank you. That's all for now. My thanks there to Peter Larsen. Well, for more agenda-setting financial insight, watch our US Breaking Views show every day at 12:30 Eastern, 17:30 BST. I'm Jamie McGeever. This is Reuters.